this is now my new personality. So there you have it. You heard it here first. Well, hello, my beautiful bookish friends, and welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you are new here. My name is Lori Beth, and welcome to my little corner of the internet, aka my booktube channel, where I like to talk about all things bookish. And specifically, in today's video, we are going to talk about what the heck I even did in the month of September. Because what was September? Like, what happened in that month? For some reason, that month feels like a blur. When I was going back and looking through my Goodreads of everything that I read in September, I was like, wait, that happened in that month? It all seems very foggy for some reason. And I think I was in this really weird space of transitioning, like waiting for fall to happen. And as the month went on, my book trend kind of started going into the fall realm of things. So I really feel like you can see my change of seasons happening with everything that I read in the month of September. And speaking of seasons changing, I would like to take a minute to thank the partner of today's video, which is Novelwicks Candles. Novelwicks is an amazing small bookish candle company that creates the most delicious and beautiful candles you have ever seen that represent not just your books, but some of your favorite TV shows and movies as well. Each candle at Novelwicks is hand poured by the owner herself, and I am so excited to announce that she just opened a storefront for this company that she has built from the ground up. So if you are in the Arkansas area, look her up and go and visit the store. If that is not an option for you, you can shop online like I do, and keep an eye on her Instagram and my Instagram for the weekly drops that happen every Thursday. I personally just received my first winter themed candle, and I am so excited to fall into yet another season change and use these amazing scents to really set the tone for some of my favorite holidays coming up. This one is the Christmas at Pemberley candle, which smells absolutely divine. And what would I love more than combining one of my favorite holidays with one of my favorite classics books of all times? I honestly can't think of anything better than that. I am so excited to announce that I am going to be a rep for the fall season, and that you can use my code Lori10 to get a discount on anything that she has currently available in the shop. And again, keep your eyes peeled on Instagram, because Murphy does run extra special deals throughout the weeks during the launches. So go ahead and visit that website, link down below, and after you buy yourself your first candle, come back to this video and let me know which one you chose for yourself. All right, beautiful reader friends, we are going to go ahead and jump into our first book of this video. And as I have already stated, I am kind of shocked looking back at what I read in the month of September. More specifically, the beginning of the month feels like a blur. The end of the month, as I said, I was kind of like coming into my true fall self. So my book started trending that way. But with that being said, we are going to start with the very first book that I read in the month of September, and that was The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Where do I even start with this book? Where do I start? I had a love-hate is not necessarily the best way to say it, because I didn't hate any aspect of this book. I had a love, it's okay relationship with this book. But first, let me explain what this book is even about for those of you that don't know. Fitz is the bastard son of the noble Prince Chivalry, raised in the shadow of the royal court by his father's gruff stableman. Fitz is treated as an outcast by all the royalty except the devious King Shrewd, who has him secretly tutored in the arts of the assassin. For in Fitz's blood runs the magic skill and the darker knowledge of a child raised with the stable hounds and rejected by his family. As barbarous raiders ravage the coasts, Fitz is growing to manhood. Soon he will face his dangerous, soul-shattering mission, and though some regard him as a threat to the throne, he may just be the key to the survival of the kingdom. So, first and foremost, this is the first book in the Farseer trilogy. The Farseer trilogy is the first series in the entire Robin Hobb universe, at least from my understanding. I usually like to start things at the beginning. I know that when it comes to some of these huge book series that have like an entire universe behind them, there are multiple ways that you can read them. But I believe, at least publication-wise, Farseer is first and foremost out of all of the books. Thoughts on this story? It was definitely an older fantasy, more of a classic fantasy. You can tell that this is a high fantasy series just from the writing style. I didn't love it at first because the dialogue felt very withdrawn to me. Like it almost felt more young adult. Like the way it was written from Fitz's point of view, he would just be like, I walked into this place, and then I walked into the next room, and then I saw this person. It felt kind of disjointed and a little bit like it was written for a younger reader than an adult reader. However, that did start to change as the story went on. And I can say that this is a very, very slow burn of a book. It felt very dense in the middle where not a whole lot was actually happening. And then that classic, like, last 20% of the book was like boom, boom, boom. All of these things happened, and it really kind of roped you in and made you want to read the second book, which I do appreciate. Again, as the story went on, I could see Robin Hobb's writing style come forward more as the characters started to grow. And I'm wondering if that's more what was happening because this is specifically this trilogy is a coming of age story. We start with Fitz, the main character, being a child that is basically abandoned at this castle and kind of just left with people to raise him that are not his immediate family. And I think that's why, as the book went on, the dialogue got better because Fitz himself started to grow up and just kind of started to become more of a young man, like a young adult himself, and learn things about life. As the synopsis describes, there is definitely a fantasy element to this. However, it is very, very light on the fantasy. It's almost kind of in the background and doesn't start to come forward more fully until the end of the book. So I did like this book. I didn't love it. I could definitely see how this story is one that you would just fall deeply in love with the more you read. And the first book was really just a very slow build to where the entire series could go. Again, this is a huge series. I think there's like 16 books total in the entire universe of this world, which is quite an undertaking. However, I think it's the kind of series that you appreciate as time goes on and as the books go on and the characters grow. I can see this being one of those worlds that really just starts to mean something to you and falling very much in love with the characters over time. I think I rated this one like 3.5 stars. Wasn't my favorite, but because of the way it ended and where it went towards the end of the book, it definitely made me want to continue with the series. So I will be picking the series back up probably this winter when I kind of like to hunker down with some more fantasy style books. All right, and next in the month of September, I got an arc of A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrienne Young. So thank you so much to NetGalley and the publishers for an advanced copy of this book. And this was a very Adrienne Young novel and very beautiful. So let's go over what this book was about. A woman investigates her brother's mysterious death while coming to terms with her own haunting past. The only thing James and Johnny Golden have ever had is each other. For as long as she can remember, James's deep connection with her twin brother, Johnny, has gone beyond intuition. She can feel what he feels. So when Johnny is killed in a tragic accident, James knows before her phone even rings that her brother is gone and that she's alone, truly alone, for the first time in her life. When James arrives in the rural town of Hawthorne, California to settle in her brother's affairs, she's forced to rehash the ominous past she and Johnny shared and finally face Micah, the only person who knows about it. He's also the only man she's ever loved. But James soon discovers that the strange connection she had with Johnny isn't quite gone, and the more she immerses herself into this world, the more questions she has about the brother she thought she knew. Johnny was keeping secrets, and he is not the only one. What she uncovers will push her to unravel what happened in the days before Johnny's death, but in the end, she'll have to decide which truths should come to light and which should stay buried forever. I mean, that's quite a synopsis. That's like a story in itself, the synopsis alone. But again, this was a very true to herself Adrienne Young novel. And if you have read any of her books, you know what I mean by that. More specifically, The Unmaking of June Farrow. What a beautifully romantic story, and this was no different. In fact, I would say this had a little bit of a darker tone to it. Adrienne Young has this way of weaving together very intricate storylines from either different points of view or different timelines, and more specifically, through families. And this was no different. And I think that the connection of a set of twins at the forefront of the story made it very gripping, especially with one of the twins having passed away. So, having read in the past about special connections that twins experience with each other, that was kind of the basis of this story. But it turns out to be a little bit more than just like this telekinetic thing that you often hear twins have, kind of true to Adrienne Young's writing style, where she weaves in some fantasy within her stories, but it almost feels like more like magical realism than fantasy itself. The setting of this story was also just completely impeccable. It was a little darker, very atmospheric. You're rehashing this woman's life from when she was a late teen, like getting ready to graduate and go out on her own for college in this small Northern California town that is very kind of in the woods, lumberjacks, small town feeling, but very atmospheric as far as like they go hiking in the woods, they go camping in the woods, there's park rangers, and then also some mysterious goings on as well. So it was a little bit darker for Adrienne Young, but not like a scary book or anything like that. Like the tone of the book was just a little darker. But again, she had that really beautiful prose to her writing style. And this was kind of a page turner for me. I kind of just the whole time I was like, I really want to figure out this story. And I couldn't really figure it out on my own. And I appreciate that too about a really good book. I did rate this one 4.5 stars. So if you do like Adrienne Young, keep your eyes peeled for this one. It comes out, let me double check here, January 2025. So in the next couple of months. All right. So next up, ladies and gentlemen, we had our first 5-star read of September. So that is a little spoiler, I guess, if you will, for some of the other books in the month. But the first 5-star that I had in the month of September was Wisteria by Adeline Grace. And holy moly, look at this beautiful cover, because I, of course, ordered from Waterstones. You know I'm a sucker for a cover. If you watch my unboxing videos, I go into great detail about how much I love covers very specifically. And sometimes I just love the European or UK covers that are available from Waterstones or some more international bookstores. I just can't help it. I love them. And this is no different. And I don't have the first 2 books from Waterstones. Now I kind of want to get them for my bookshelves. But you know what? That's an issue for another day. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But let's talk about what this book is about. This is the 3rd and final book in the Belladonna series by Adeline Grace, and kind of what kickstarted me into my fall reads for the year. So if you have not read this series at all, it starts off following a main character in the first book named Signa, who is kind of touched or kissed by death. She has spent her whole life really just watching the people around her kind of meet untimely deaths. And she has been a ward of any family member that will take her on until she is old enough to receive her inheritance that her parents left her. She has a special ability to talk to and interact with ghosts, and that is kind of the premise for the entire first 2 books of this series. In the first book, she ends up staying with some distant family members that she has never met before, and she builds a relationship with her cousin Blythe. In the first book, Blythe is actually not doing too hot, and Signa spends her time in that story trying to figure out what is making Blythe so ill. As the story unfolds, Blythe starts to recuperate, and her and Signa create this beautiful like cousin relationship. If you have cousins, like I come from a big family, you know what I mean. Like there is something very special about a relationship with a cousin. They're like not quite as annoying as a sibling because you don't have to live with them, but they're still family. So they still like you still love them. and they mean a lot to you. So we start the book following Blythe and following her into this agreement that she has made with fate in order to protect her cousin Cigna. It's kind of like this tangled web of people. So we have Cigna and Death and Fate and Blythe. Basically, at the beginning of the story, Blythe and Fate can't stand each other. They fight nonstop. They're constantly bickering. It is basically a true shit show, if you will. But she has made this deal to protect her cousin Cigna. She has now basically changed her own fate to be with fate for the rest of her days. So ensues with this particular book a very, very delicious enemies to lovers story, and also that beautiful atmosphere that Adeline Grace brings to all of her books. And why I said it kind of leans more towards a fall read, and it is because of this world that they live in. There is magic, there are beautiful manors, there are plants, there's foliage, there's death, there's fate, there's darkness. It is a beautiful blend of a very romance-heavy book, but also there's always some kind of like mystery unfolding within the story. So it keeps you very gripped in as far as the plot line goes as well. And then the characters, you kind of just can't help but fall in love with. So when you start the series out and Blythe is sick and she's kind of meek and mild because she's not well, and then following her into this last installment of the series where she is very stubborn and very opinionated, kind of that classic female character that you kind of can't help but fall in love with. And then again, in this setting of this beautiful world that they live in. If you are looking for a very well done trilogy, this is up there as one of my favorites. You hear me talk about series and duologies more specifically all the time and how much I love a duology, but this series to me got better and better as the books went on. And that's not to say that I didn't love all of them, because I actually did. Like, I loved the first through the last book of this series, and this one specifically was just a beautiful, beautiful ending to this world. And I was left just feeling like happy and a little giddy and just completely 100% satisfied. And that to me is all I could ever ask for, especially as a series goes on, because you never really know what you're going to continue to get. But Adeline Grace, she knocked it out of the park with 1, 2, and 3. All right, next up, in the month of September, I read my second, let's count it, second 5-star read of the month, and that was Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent, and also the Waterstones edition, because how gorgeous is this book? I just geeked out over the cover of this because I was like, look at these Wednesday Addams vibes she's bringing. Absolutely love it. Love the lime green. And clearly loved this story so much. So let's read the back of the book of this one together. Sally Diamond cannot understand why what she did was so strange. She was only doing what her father told her to do, to put him out with the rubbish when he died. Now Sally is the center of attention, not only from the hungry media and police detectives, but there is also a sinister voice from a past she cannot remember. As she begins to discover the horrors of her childhood, Sally steps into the world for the first time, making new friends and big decisions, and learning that people don't always mean what they say. But who is the man observing Sally from the other side of the world? And why does her new neighbor seem to be obsessed with her? Sally's trust issues are about to be severely challenged. Honestly, this is truly one of the best books I have read, and I can't tell you how long. So in this story, we follow Sally, who is, I believe she's in her early 40s, and she's living with her father, who is ill and on his deathbed at the beginning of the book, and ends up passing away. When he passes away, she does what her father had told her to do, and she scoops him up, puts him in a bag, takes him out to the incinerator where they burn all of their garbage. As time passes on, people start to notice a very weird smell coming from the back part of their property where this incinerator is, and suddenly the police get involved, and Sally gets in big trouble for trying to discard of her father's remains. So it starts to become apparent that Sally deals with some sort of social disability or something like that. Her father was a psychiatrist himself and never diagnosed her with anything specifically, but she grew up very secluded and not ever really needing to be forced to interact with other humans outside of graduating from school. This kind of led her to be a recluse in her adult life, and she spent most of her time not even talking to anybody but her own father. She was the kind of person that took things literally. Like, you couldn't say something to her like, oh, when I die, put me out with the garbage bins, because she doesn't know how to understand that is just kind of a figure of speech that someone would say. She would take it very literally. Because of this, now that her father is gone and she is an adult woman trying to live on her own for the first time, she's going through this whole experience of learning life, but from an adult point of view. So it made the story just so intriguing, because it was almost like a coming of age book from a woman in her 40s. And it was very endearing because you could tell that she was trying so hard to learn how to live a normal life and how to interact with people around her. On top of that, all of these weird things start to come about from her childhood. And it takes the book almost into like this true crime situation. And I don't want to give away too much, but she just starts to learn more about where she came from, why maybe she is the way she is, but then she also just tries so hard to learn and to grow at the point of life that she's at in this story. It was just absolutely impeccable. The writing was so gripping. Again, because of Sally and her personality traits and what she was dealing with, she was one of the most vulnerable, most raw, most authentic characters I have ever read about. And it made her so endearing, and you just wanted to see good things happen for her. But then also it was like just so relatable when she would struggle with things too, because she definitely wasn't perfect. And anytime something would happen, she was trying to learn from it. I don't know. Liz Nugent was an absolutely out of this world writer. This is an extraordinary novel. It made me laugh out loud at points in time. It made me kind of want to cry at points in time, and then also left me with just a very happy, satisfied feeling at the end. This to me also leaned more towards a fall read, just because I knew a little bit of where the story went. So again, it does kind of go into a true crime area. But if that's not your thing, don't let that deter you from the book. The storyline itself is just so phenomenal that I would suggest this to so many people. I would just call this a very well written fiction novel. There are some dark topics in here discussed, so definitely check trigger warnings on this book. But again, I can't go on about this book enough. This was by far one of the best books that I have read in a long time. All right, my friends, hang in there with me. We are quickly coming to the end of our list here. We only have a few more books to go over. And the next one we are going over is my third 5-star read in the month of September. And that was none other than my new personality, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And once again, the really beautiful matte black Waterstones edition. My husband actually got this for me for Christmas. It's one of the first Waterstones books I've ever had, but I knew that I wanted a copy that I was going to just look at on my shelves forever and ever and be like, oh my God, that's my book. That's my Secret History copy. That's the one that I annotated, the one that I highlighted and marked. And the pages are probably going to get worn from me rereading this more than once, because I love this book and I love Donna Tartt. In fact, let me read you what I wrote on my Goodreads review of this book. Well, we've already talked about how I rated it 5 stars. I would sell my soul to sit down with Donna Tartt and ponder life's existence over a bottle of wine. This woman can do no wrong in my eyes. And she is also one of my auto-buy authors, and I've only read one book from her. That was another video I did recently, which I will link down below. Without a doubt, I will read all of her backlog items, and I will continue to buy her books. And if you know anything about her, the rumor of Donna Tartt is, or it's not a rumor, I think it's, she's very specifically stated this before, that she only comes out with a book like every 10 years. Again, I don't know if that means that she's writing a book every 10 years, like it takes her 10 years to write a book, or if she's just like, I need time. So like in about 10 years, you'll get another book. But with that being said, I can very truly state that her writing style feels like it took her 10 years to write this book. It is brilliant. It is so descriptive and so detailed that I could just sense myself in this story. Like I truly felt like I was there. But let me back up. I'm getting very much ahead of myself. So anybody that does not know the premise of The Secret History, we follow a group of students at a small New England college, and more specifically, our main character, Richard, who comes from California, transfers to this New England college into this world of studying Greek amongst a very select group of students. So it is your classic dark academia setting where you have a tight-knit group of misfits, if you will. Like they all come from different backgrounds, different upbringings. They have different lifestyles. Some of them are wealthy. Some of them don't have two pennies to rub together, but they all have their own stories. And together they create this dynamic group, and a group that kind of starts to blur the lines of good and bad because they're living a typical college age lifestyle, the drugs, the sex, the drinking, the parties, and then being involved in these like very competitive programs at a college, like studying something like Greek, which is not for the faint of heart. It creates like the perfect setup for something to go awry, something to go bad, and that is where this story takes us. It is a very dense book, but not in a bad way. And sometimes I hate using that word because I feel like density means not good, but sometimes density means good. Like it actually means you have a meaty story with involved character development and feeling connected to more than one person, and not just the characters, but the plot of the book as well. I am a character girly through and through, so I love the book just for that. But because of the plot being involved also, I mean, I was just sold. And Donna Tartt has this way of writing that makes you feel like you're learning, like you are smart, you're smarter for having read her book, and I appreciate that as a reader. You can tell that she's a brilliant woman herself, and she's very clearly a natural writer, but she never makes you feel like you shouldn't be reading this book. Like, have you ever read those books where you're like, I don't feel like I'm smart enough to read this? That's not the case for this book. You actually feel smarter reading it. I don't know another way to describe it. But anyways, this has quickly gone up the list of favorite dark academia novels, auto by authors, favorite books of all time, 5 stars, 10 stars, 18,000 stars. As I have already stated, this is now my new personality. So there you have it. You heard it here first. All right, friends, we have done it. We have made it to the last book on our list. So the last book that I read in the month of September, and I've got to say, clearly as the month went on, I was trending towards my October reads. Like I was ready. I was ready for some spooky season books, and I brought the month in for a landing with Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice, and the cute little mass market book that I got, why do we not have more of these? Like, look at this. Look how fun this is. It's fun sized. It was easy to read, like easy to hold. I love books this size. Why aren't we making more of these? I feel like this was kind of like something we've stepped away from, and I don't know why. Like, can we bring this back? But anyways, Interview with a Vampire. I think most of us know the synopsis of this one, but just to kind of bring in a quick recap of the story, this follows a main character named Louis, who is a vampire. And at the beginning of the story, he is being interviewed by a young man who just wants to kind of learn his story, how he became a vampire, the centuries of time he has now spent living. And I think that the premise of this book is what really sucks most of us in, because how many novels are there about vampires? Lots and lots of them. But the idea that a very fragile, meek human is going to sit in a room for hours on end and interview a vampire to learn about his life is just top notch. Like, I don't know if I would love a premise of a book more than that. So with that being said, we get that beautiful atmosphere of starting centuries ago with a vampire in the heart of New Orleans. Like, New Orleans, when it became New Orleans, why is there such a big French influence in New Orleans in the first place? Because of French immigrants to that area. And it was just a beautifully set up atmosphere for the start of this book. So we start out in New Orleans, becomes a vampire. He becomes a vampire by this awful vampire named Lestat. But they kind of just create this little family system together, as you often see with these vampires. Lewis doesn't know anything about being a vampire. He leans very heavily on Lestat to kind of help him through this new life, and Lestat leans on him for lots of other resources. As the story goes on, they move into different areas of the world. They kind of expand their family, and they start to, over time, learn more about vampires in general, where vampires came from, interacting with other vampires, and kind of living life as an immortal creature. Of course, as we've read like time and time again, being an immortal is not always like this beautiful, easy thing. We follow our characters really dealing with how to fulfill these long, never-ending lives, how to find love, how to find pleasure, how to just basically live an enjoyable life as an immortal creature, and also dealing with the dynamic of different personalities and kind of expanding knowledge on their species in general. So the storyline itself, I really loved. I do think that it kind of slumped in the middle of the book for me, where the beginning was very exciting when you're following the character kind of becoming a vampire and learning about this new life he's going to live. And then the middle was kind of just like, it felt like not a lot was going on. I was kind of like, this feels like a really long book. What is going to happen? Where are we going to go with this? And then boom, the ball started rolling again and things were happening, and I was kind of sucked back in and very also intrigued how the book ended. So it was kind of an up and down for me. I think I rated this like 3 or 3.5 stars, so not super high. I would like to continue on with the series. I believe the next book does follow Lestat, so that does kind of intrigue me a little bit. So I think I will eventually, but I do think I also will have to be kind of in the mindset to want to pick it up. But because this one did kind of feel a little bit dense in the middle, here's an example of using dense as maybe not the best scenario for a book. That worries me a little bit about the second one, because I think the second one is longer. I could be wrong on that. However, I did enjoy this book. I'm glad that I finally read it. I mean, this has been on my TBR for years. I saw the movie to this book when I was far too young to be watching it. In fact, kind of a little bit of a problematic movie looking back on it, but that's neither here nor there. So I'm finally glad that I actually read this novel. I've always wanted to read it, and I think this was a perfect time of year to kind of step into, you know, the darker vampire-esque spooky stories. So I did really like it. Wasn't my favorite of the month, but I will definitely be continuing on with the series eventually. Well, there you have it, my friends. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of September. Definitely started trending more towards my spooky season reads, and kind of also bizarre that I had 3 5-star reads in this month. Some really, really good books. So overall, I would say I had some really solid landing books in the month of September. Some that were kind of a little bit more on the fence for me, but overall, a really, really good month. Once again, I would like to thank Novelwicks for partnering with me on today's video. Don't forget you can use that code Lori10 to get a discount on anything in the shop. Check out the website linked down below as well. As always, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button because it always helps a girl out. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of my other upcoming videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button too. As always, it has been an absolute blast, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one.